Welcome to PlayPianoToday.com. This is Chapter 1 from Salsa for Piano and Keyboard.
All day long, floating on the water. And all day long, floating on the sea. But it's alright with me. Oh yeah, we're going south of the border today, into the Caribbean. I'm going to show you how to mix up some musical salsa and add it to your music to give it a wonderful Latin flavor. This is really fun stuff. We're going to have some tricks for your right hand, some tricks for your left hand. All very interesting spice to add to your toolbox. I think you're going to have a great time with this. I certainly am. You may be wondering, what's the similarities and differences between Latin music and blues music that we've been studying? Now, there are a lot of similarities, and there's lots of differences too. Let's start with some of the things that are similar. Probably the most obvious is some of the chord voicings or chord shapes that I use to play the music. Now, the rhythm is quite different, right? We'll look at that in a second. Here's a familiar chord shape from the blues. Remember this? We played it like this. All of a sudden, that chord shape is in the context of blues. Now let's use it again, but play it and go a little different direction with it for Latin music, like this. Right? We went a little different direction with our thumb there, and the underlying rhythm really was different, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But the chord shape is similar. One of the things that I'm going to do for consistency's sake in this lesson as well is I'm going to use these Latin rhythms, and we're going to play them through the same chords that we used in the blues. So if you haven't studied the blues, you need to back up and look at our blues course. But if you remember from your studies there, you'll remember it was 12 bars or 12 measures of chords, right? So we're going to use those chords but with a Latin feel. Okay, so we've looked at a similarity, and that's the chord shape. That's one of the similarities. Now let's look at one of the foundational differences between Latin music and the blues. To highlight one of the differences between blues and Latin music, let's talk about the underlying rhythm. Now, if you haven't noticed yet, when we played the blues, it has a swing feel to it, like this. Now listen to the underlying beat. It's kind of shuffling along. Kind of swings. That's what makes the blues come alive. All that shuffling really pushes the blues down the road. Now, the pulse of Latin music is very different from the blues. In fact, it has a very straight pulse. It seems like that would be less interesting, but something happens in the magic of Latin music that brings it alive and brings that special spice out. It sounds like this. Now, the pulse that's underlying what you're hearing is very straight, like a train coming down the track. You hear how straight that is, but it's very, very nice. Now, at the beginning of this lesson, I told you I was going to play these Latin rhythmic patterns over the framework of the 12-bar blues. Now, here's the pattern. Isn't that nice? I'm going to show you exactly how to play that in a few seconds. But first, let me show you how it goes over the chords of the 12-bar blues. Here we go. Once again, I just want to remind you, these are the chords that we use to play through the 12-bar blues. Now, we're not going to play with a blues style. We're working on Latin styles. But let's use the same basic chords or song form just to give us a structure to work over. Let's look at the very first chord, C minor 7. Now, C minor 7 traditionally looks like this. That's the sound you hear right before a train runs you over. Right? Okay, now we're not going to use the train sound, although that might be cool in some applications. We're not going to use the train voicing as a comp chord. We're going to use a voicing like this for C minor 7. Or I should say, this is one of the voicings I'm going to teach you for C minor 7. Okay, here is the dominant 7 on bottom this time. Here is the minor 3rd. Here's the 5th up on top. Okay? And we've got a mystery note right in here, this D. It really fights with that E flat. Do you hear that? Musically, that's called dissonance. And that would really make you mad if that's all you heard. But listen how that sound within the context of this, sounds real nice. Okay, it adds something. Here's a trick. I'm going to give you a tip that I always tell my students. And once you wrap your brain around this concept, you'll really start moving ahead. I always tell them, it takes a little ugly to make something really beautiful. Now, isn't that a strange statement, right? We could just play the C minor chord and that would be very correct, right? It'd be a C minor chord, but you can throw a little ugly in there and make it really beautiful. It's kind of the difference between a computer-drawn picture that's exactly perfect, and then you compare that with the same picture that an artist draws. And even though the artist's picture may not be as mathematically perfect as the computer picture, it's much more beautiful. It's the same in music. I want to teach you to throw in some ugly stuff or some dissonant stuff. Some things that fight, but sound really rich in the right context. Okay? That's just a little philosophical highlight. But I want you to start thinking that way because that'll change the way you play. Okay, so anyway, we have the dominant 7th, the minor 3rd, the 5th on top, and then the D in the middle. The D is the 9th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? Okay. Now you may have noticed, if you were super quick, that this D was also down here as the 2nd, right? 1, 2 is a D. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is also a D. Okay. The reason I'm calling it a 9 is simply this. In music theory, whenever the 7th is present, you always call this note the 9th. If the 7th was not present, we'd call it a 2nd. Okay?
Thanks for joining us today. This has just been a very short sample from the lesson titled Salsa for Piano and Keyboard, Chapter 1. If you'd like to see more, go to playpianotoday.com/video. In this website, there's a wealth of online piano and keyboard lessons that you can dig into right away, including this lesson. Before you leave this site, though, would you do us a favor? If these lessons are valuable to you and you'd like to see more, would you just take a minute and leave a comment on the site that you're on right now? Or you can simply rate the video. Either way, it really helps us and enables us to post lessons just like this one, free of charge. Thanks!